Her security got her pregnant. Before the Okafors became one of Nigeria's wealthiest families, before the glass mansions and private jets, Matthew and Clara were simply two children sharing the same compound in Enugu. Childhood in the compound. Their parents lived in flats facing each other, separated only by a narrow walkway. The walls were thin, and every sound carried, so neighbors knew one another's business. From their earliest days, Matthew and Clara grew up under watchful eyes, not just of their parents but of everyone in the compound. Matthew's father was a hard-working trader who counted every kobo, while Clara's father, a retired civil servant, ruled his home with stern discipline. Both families preached order above comfort. Children were not allowed to wander, not allowed to mix carelessly. "Don't let me catch you following those street children," Matthew's father barked often. "Sit with your books, not with idle company," Clara's mother insisted, pressing her to stay by the kerosene lamp long after others had gone to play. Silent observers of each other. They rarely played together, yet they could not help but notice one another. Clara heard Matthew's steady voice reciting figures into the night. Matthew saw her carrying heavy buckets of water, jaw clenched in determination. Respect grew quietly between them, born of shared discipline, shared restrictions, and the unspoken burden of never bringing shame to their families. Youth and boundaries. By adolescence, Matthew stood tall, shoulders straight with ambition. Clara, modest and reserved, avoided the gaze of boys who teased in the compound. Neither strayed from the lines drawn by their parents. No late nights, no sneaking out, no careless friendships. Though neighbors mocked their parents as too strict, both families remained unbending. And so Matthew and Clara's childhood was shaped by invisible boundaries, protective yet suffocating. Shared responsibilities. The bond between their parents was practical as well as neighborly. When Matthew's father left early for Ogbete Market, he often left the boy with Clara's mother. "Please keep an eye on him till his mother returns," he'd say, leaving little Matthew half asleep in their sitting room. Likewise, when Clara's mother was called for women's fellowship, she entrusted her daughter to the Okafors. "She won't disturb you," she assured. "Just give her her books." The children grew accustomed to shuffling between the two flats, almost as if it were one big family housed with two doors. Joy in caring for each other's children. It wasn't a burden. It was joy. Matthew's mother often braided Clara's hair while chatting with other women. Clara's father sometimes tutored Matthew patiently, helping him form letters in old exercise books. At mealtimes, there were no barriers. Clara dipped her spoon into Matthew's family's ogbono soup. Matthew shared jollof rice with Clara's siblings, a quiet foundation for the future. In these small exchanges, braiding hair, sharing food, fetching water, the families grew inseparable. The compound became more than walls and walkways. It was a single household teaching discipline, community, and care. That closeness laid a foundation for the bond that would one day lead to marriage. Confinement and quiet frustration. To Matthew and Clara, however, childhood often felt like a cage. Their parents repeated the same refrains. "Good children stay indoors. Friends outside can ruin your future. Stay where our eyes can see you." Clara longed to join the girls laughing and gossiping by the roadside, braiding each other's hair. Matthew yearned to chase footballs in the dusty street. Yet fear of their parents' glares kept them confined. The turning point of maturity. By secondary school, perspective began to shift. They saw how those same neighborhood children they envied stumbled into gangs, dropped out of school, or fell to early pregnancies. Slowly, Matthew and Clara realized the walls were not cages but shields. When Matthew gained admission to university, he recognized the value of long evenings spent with books. Clara, with her excellent grades, saw how her mother's strictness had protected her. What once felt like harshness revealed itself as love. A shift in the air. With maturity came something new. Clara, dressed in white after Sunday service, suddenly struck Matthew as more than the girl across the walkway. His heart raced when she smiled. Clara, too, noticed Matthew's deepened voice, his respectful manner, his broadened shoulders. For the first time, she wondered what it would feel like to belong to him.
Hidden moments.
Privacy was scarce in the compound. Parents' eyes were everywhere. Yet love has a way of creating space. One evening by the tap, Matthew's fingers brushed Clara's. She didn't pull away. Another rainy afternoon, alone in the corridor, he kissed her. It was shy, awkward, trembling, but unforgettable. From then on, they stretched errands into secret walks, lingered after prayers holding hands beneath the table, and whispered dreams under the mango tree. Shared dreams. They spoke of the future. One day, Matthew said, I'll build something greater than this compound. You will stand beside me. Clara smiled shyly. Only promise you won't forget me when that day comes. Their bond was built not just on affection but on the discipline and dreams that had shaped them since childhood. The decision to speak. But Matthew knew secrecy could not last. One night after supper he stood before his father. Papa, I want to speak of Clara, he said, chest tight. His father lowered his Bible slowly. Clara? The neighbor's daughter. Yes, Papa. I have known her all my life. She is disciplined, not like other girls. She is the one I wish to marry. His father's reaction. Silence hung heavy. Finally, Pa Okafor asked, So, while I thought you were studying, you were watching Clara? Matthew braced himself. Papa, this is no game. I know my heart. After a long pause, his father sighed. If you are serious, we must do it properly. Tomorrow I will speak with her parents. The meeting of families. The next evening, Pa Okafor crossed the compound. Clara's father welcomed him in surprise. Over cola nuts and greetings, Pa Okafor spoke. Our children are not playing. Matthew believes he has found something in Clara. Let us not dismiss it as childishness. Let us guide them. Clara's parents exchanged startled glances. Her mother whispered, So this was happening under our noses? Her father frowned. But they are still young. Have they even finished their schooling? They are young, Pa Okafor admitted. But better we shape them early than leave them to strangers. Clara's mother softened. If it is Matthew, I cannot complain. He is respectful. If this is God's will, we should not fight it. Pa'is nodded slowly. Let us watch. If they prove themselves steadfast, we will bless them when the time is right. And so, what began with hidden glances and stolen kisses beneath the mango tree became something weighty. An affection now seen, measured, and guided under the eyes of family. The beginning of a courtship. From the day their families gave quiet consent, Matthew and Clara's bond stepped out of the shadows. No longer did they have to sneak glances like guilty children. They could sit together in the compound corridor, speaking softly as the evening breeze passed. Of course, every move was still watched, parents pretending to be busy while keeping sharp eyes fixed on them. If Clara's mother found them sitting a little too close, she would clear her throat, loud enough to scatter butterflies. If Matthew's father saw him following Clara to the well, he would grumble, Books first, love later. But deep down, both households understood. They were no longer fighting this bond, only guiding it. And for Matthew and Clara, that small allowance was enough to bring quiet joy, balancing school and love. At the time, both were finishing secondary school, and their parents drew a firm line. Education must come first. Love cannot cook soup, Pa'is warned one evening. If you fail in school, you fail in life. The words stuck. Determined not to disappoint, Matthew buried himself in his studies. Clara, too, doubled her efforts. They found ways to merge discipline with affection. Sitting together under the glow of a lantern, textbooks open. He explained mathematics step by step until she grasped it. She helped polish his English essays with a gentleness that made him smile. Sometimes they tested each other with mock exams, cheering when answers were right, laughing at mistakes. At the end of such nights, they promised in hushed tones, No matter what, we will not let love distract us. We will let it strengthen us. Subtle tests from their parents. Their parents, cautious but curious, tested the relationship quietly. One afternoon, Clara's mother called her into the kitchen. Take this soup to the Okafors, she said, handing her a tray. But she lingered by the doorway, watching. Clara walked across the compound steadily, knocked politely, and served with patience. She smiled as she set the bowls before Matthew's mother, bowing respectfully. Later, her mother nodded to herself. The girl had not forgotten her manners. Another time, Pa Okafor sent Matthew to escort Clara and her siblings to choir rehearsal. On the way, a group of boys laughed and jeered. "So this is your wife, eh?" Matthew didn't boast or flare up. Instead, he answered calmly, "She is a good girl. Respect her." When the story reached the ears of the parents, they exchanged looks of quiet approval, deepening affection. As months passed, the bond grew roots. Their conversations shifted from childish chatter to serious dreams. "I want to start a business after school," Matthew said one evening, voice low, determined. "Something big, something that can carry a family. Even if it takes years, I'll make it work. Will you stand with me?" Clara met his gaze steadily. "I will. But promise me one thing. You won't let money change who you are." Matthew smiled faintly. "Not if you are beside me." It wasn't idle romance. These were seeds of a future, carefully planted in the soil of discipline and shared vision. Community whispers. The compound, of course, was buzzing. Neighbors gossiped by the wells, their voices dripping with half concern, half amusement. Children of nowadays, see how their parents are encouraging them too soon, some said. Others shook their heads. Better to marry someone you grew up with than to chase shadows outside. But Matthew and Clara learned to ignore the noise. Their eyes were fixed on each other, their books, and the subtle approval of their parents. The assurance of time. By the time both gained admission into higher institutions, their love had already endured scrutiny, discipline, and distance under watchful eyes. Everyone could see. This was no passing fancy. Their parents, once wary, now spoke of them with cautious pride. In the same compound where their story began, neighbors pointed and whispered, "See those two? From childhood till now. God truly wrote their journey." Distance and longing. When admission letters arrived, joy came with sorrow. Clara gained admission to study education in Nsukka, while Matthew was posted to study economics in Lagos. For two young hearts who had grown under the same roof, the separation felt like a tearing apart. Their parents comforted them. "Face your books. If this love is real, it will stand." But for Matthew and Clara, comfort didn't ease the ache. The late-night chats under the lantern, the stolen glances in the compound walkway, the laughter shared during errands, all of it suddenly vanished. The struggle to keep in touch. These were the days before easy mobile phones. Letters became lifelines. Matthew's handwriting filled long pages, describing his lectures, the chaotic energy of Lagos, the noise of buses and markets, and his ambition to one day conquer the city. Clara replied with softer words, writing of hostile struggles, teaching practice, and her daily prayers for his safety. But letters delayed. Sometimes weeks passed without word, and doubts crept in. Is he too busy? Has he forgotten me? Clara wondered. Is she changing her mind? Matthew asked himself. The silence was heavy, but each time a letter finally arrived, relief swept away the doubts. They clung to those pages like oxygen. Their bond, stretched but not broken, held strong. The making of a visionary. The Lagos hustle. Lagos was a city that swallowed men whole, but Matthew was not ordinary. While many classmates chased nightclubs and distractions, Matthew sought the heart of business. He roamed Balogun Market for hours, not to buy but to learn. He studied how traders bargained, how goods moved from wholesaler to retailer, how profit was made in chaos. He spoke with port workers, listened to drivers, and memorized the rhythm of trade. During holidays, while others rested, Matthew hustled. He bought second-hand clothes, okrika, and resold them on campus. Later, he dabbled in electronics, partnering with older traders. Profits were small, but he was learning. He was building networks. He was saving every kobo. Clara's invisible hand. Though far away, Clara's presence was strong. In her letters, she anchored him. "Do not let Lagos swallow you," she wrote once. "Remember discipline. Remember why you started." Her words rang in his ears each time temptation appeared. Shortcuts, shady deals, easy money. He turned them down, guided by her steady voice. Clara became his conscience even in absence, the foundation of an empire. By final year, Matthew had saved enough to attempt something bigger, importing spare parts from Cotonou. Risky, yes, but promising. He partnered with a cousin near the border, moving goods on a small scale. It worked. Slowly, he carved a name for himself as disciplined, sharp, and honest. By graduation, while others were job hunting, Matthew was already a budding entrepreneur. Love tested, yet standing. Reunion and renewed vows. After years of distance, they met again during a long holiday. Clara had matured, her quiet beauty radiant. Matthew had grown older, shoulders heavy with ambition. They stood once more under the mango tree where their first kisses were stolen. Silence lingered before Matthew whispered, "You see? We survived." Clara's eyes softened. "Yes, and this is only the beginning." Parents' quiet approval. By then, their parents no longer worried. They watched with pride. What began as childhood glances had survived secrecy, strictness, distance, and the temptations of the world. They knew this was destiny, not infatuation, a future taking shape. After graduation, while others waited endlessly for white-collar jobs, Matthew expanded his trade. With savings and a loan from an uncle, he grew his importing business. He traveled to Onitsha and Cotonou, sleeping in buses, eating bread and pure water to save money. Slowly, markets whispered his name. Clara, still finishing her degree, watched from afar. Friends teased her. "Why hold on to a hustling trader? Don't you want a rich boyfriend in town?" She smiled quietly. She knew Matthew. She had grown up beside his determination. He was not a man who quit. Even when weeks passed without letters, Clara stood firm. She wrote, "I know you are working hard. Don't worry about me. Just stay true. I will always be here." Those words became Matthew's anchor. Each time a deal failed, each time Lagos threatened to crush him, he pulled out her letter and read it again until strength returned. And so, step by step, one hustling trader became a visionary, carrying not only his ambition but the unwavering faith of the girl who had loved him since the compound days. The season of waiting. At first, the decision to open their hearts to children was filled with joy. Matthew and Clara had spent 3 years building their love like a fortress, traveling, laughing, holding each other through life's storms. Parenthood felt like the natural next step, a blessing to crown their union. Every month, Clara waited with hopeful anticipation. She would count the days carefully, marking her small calendar with a secret smile. Each time her period delayed by even a day, she would whisper to herself, "Maybe this is it. Maybe God has answered." But then, like a cruel rhythm, the red flow returned, washing away her fragile hope. At first, she laughed it off, hiding her disappointment with teasing words. "Maybe God wants us to enjoy each other just a little longer," she told Matthew, forcing a smile. He would chuckle softly, pulling her into his arms. "Children will come in his time. Let us not worry. After all, did we not survive distance, gossip, and struggle? This too will pass." And so, for the first year, their faith remained steady. They encouraged each other, prayed together, and brushed away doubts. Silent questions. But as the second year slipped by, the laughter began to fade. Clara would linger in the bathroom longer than usual, staring at the pad in her hand as though it had betrayed her. Sometimes she would sit quietly on the bed afterward, eyes clouded with thoughts she dared not speak. What if something is wrong with me? She wondered. What if I can never carry a child? Matthew, too, wrestled with unspoken fears. In moments of solitude, when business had settled and he was left alone with his thoughts, he asked himself, what if I am the problem? I have never made any woman pregnant, not even by accident. Could the fault be mine? But neither of them voiced these fears. They loved each other too much to inflict wounds with careless words. So they carried the silence like a shared burden, hoping, praying, waiting. Whispers in the dark. The world, however, was not silent. Relatives began to murmur during family gatherings. 3 years, for years, and still no child? An aunt whispered, shaking her head. Maybe they enjoyed too much before marriage. Now God is teaching them a lesson, another added. Some of Matthew's business colleagues, men who wore their children like badges of honor, laughed crudely behind his back. Big man like you with all this money and no child to inherit? Ah, my brother, better find a solution before it is too late. The words trickled back to him through careless tongues, and though he pretended not to care, they stung deeply. Clara, too, was not spared. At society gatherings, women with painted lips and glittering jewelry whispered behind fans. All her humility cannot give her a baby. She cooks and prays, yes, but what is a wife without children? The comments cut her like sharp knives, but she held her dignity. She smiled politely, excused herself when she could, and later cried quietly in the privacy of her home. Cracks in the fortress. Their once carefree evenings began to change. Where there had once been laughter and playful teasing, there was now an undertone of worry. Sometimes Clara would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, silent tears slipping into her pillow. She tried to turn away so Matthew would not notice, but he always did. He would pull her close, holding her tightly against his chest. "Don't cry," he whispered. "We are in this together. You are my wife before anything else. With or without children, I will never let you go." But even as he said the words, his heart carried its own unspoken ache. The silence between them deepened. They were united in love, but divided by fear of what the future held, fear of what people would say, fear of failing each other. Faith on trial. They began to pray more fervently. Every Sunday, Clara lingered at the altar during communion, her whispered prayers blending with her tears. "Lord, please, bless my womb." Matthew, though less vocal, carried his plea in his heart. He began giving larger offerings at church, sowing seeds of faith. With each envelope he dropped into the collection basket. Together, they visited hospitals quietly, seeking medical advice without letting family know. Tests were run, results were given, always vague, always inconclusive. Nothing seemed to be wrong with either of them, yet nothing was happening. It was in those moments that their faith was most tested, not only in God but in each other. The unspoken bond. One evening, after another disappointing cycle, Clara broke down openly. "Matthew," she sobbed, "what if I can never give you children? What if I am barren?" He cupped her face in his hands, lifting her gaze to meet his. "Never say that," he said firmly. "You are not barren, and even if God delays, I will not leave you. Did I marry you for children? No. I married you because you are my beginning and my ending." His words steadied her heart, but she knew the world would not be so kind. Outside their home, society demanded heirs. Inside their home, they fought daily to protect their love from the weight of expectation. And yet, in the midst of tears and whispers, they held on to each other. Their marriage had been tested by distance, gossip, and hardship before. Now it faced its greatest trial, the waiting, seeking answers. For years, Matthew and Clara had lived in silence, hiding their pain behind smiles, wealth, and success. Outwardly, they were the perfect couple, admired in church, respected in business, and envied in their neighborhood. But when the laughter of children echoed from other compounds and their home remained quiet, the silence became unbearable. One night, as they sat in their large sitting room, the weight of unspoken grief finally broke through. Matthew stared into the dim light, his jaw tight. "Clara," he said softly but firmly, "we cannot keep pretending. We must know what is wrong. If it is me, I want to know. If it is you, we will face it together. But let's stop suffering in silence." Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. For years, she had carried the invisible guilt, believing she was the problem. Now, hearing his words felt like a lifeline. She nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, let's find out." That night marked the beginning of a new journey. One not about business deals or social status, but about faith, medicine, and resilience. The secret visits. A week later, they began discreet visits to a private fertility clinic in Lagos. They didn't want their families, friends, or society to know. They had grown weary of whispers, of pitying glances, of relatives who asked questions with smiles but judged with their eyes. In the clinic's waiting room, they sat side by side among strangers who bore the same burden. Some couples held hands tightly, their eyes bright with hope. Others looked defeated, as though years of disappointment had drained them of strength. Clara clutched Matthew's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Whatever they say, we face it together," she whispered. Matthew's heart pounded, but he nodded. Together. The tests. The doctors ordered a full panel of tests. Blood work, scans, hormone checks, semen analysis. Days turned into weeks as they moved from one appointment to the next, each one stretching their patience. Finally, the day of results arrived. The doctor, a calm middle-aged man, sat across from them with files in hand. The room felt suffocatingly heavy. "Mr. Okafor," the doctor began gently, "your sperm count is lower than normal. This doesn't mean you cannot father a child, but it does make conception more difficult." Matthew's chest tightened. For a moment he couldn't breathe. But when he glanced at Clara, she reached for his hand. He drew strength from her grip. The doctor turned to her. "Mrs. Okafor, your prolactin levels are higher than expected. Elevated prolactin can disrupt ovulation and make pregnancy difficult." Clara's world spun. She had feared it was her fault all along. Now, hearing confirmation felt like a knife. Tears blurred her vision. But in that same moment, she realized Matthew also carried a burden. They were both facing the storm. Shared responsibility. That night, Clara cried into Matthew's chest. "So it's both of us. What if it never happens?" He stroked her back gently, his voice steady though his own heart ached. "Then we will keep trying, keep fighting. You are not the problem. I am not the problem. This is our challenge. And we will overcome it together." Those words became their anchor. The medications and hope. The doctors prescribed treatments. For Matthew, supplements and medicines to improve sperm count and motility. For Clara, tablets to regulate hormones and reduce prolactin. They were also given lifestyle advice. Eat healthier, sleep better, reduce stress, and exercise more. Patience is key, the doctor reminded them. Many couples conceive after treatment. Do not give up hope. They left the clinic holding hands, renewed with determination. "This is not the end," Matthew said firmly. "It is only the beginning. Wealth means nothing if I cannot share my life with you and our children. I will do whatever it takes." Clara wiped her tears and nodded. "And I will too. We started this journey together from the compound. We won't stop here." The waiting. The next months were filled with strict routines. Matthew took his supplements faithfully every morning. Clara never missed a single tablet. Their meals changed. More vegetables, fruits, pepper soup, and traditional dishes known for fertility. One evening, Clara joked, "If bitter leaf soup can give us a baby, then I'll eat it every day." Matthew chuckled, though his eyes often betrayed his quiet worry. Months passed and still no pregnancy. Each cycle was a wave of hope followed by crushing disappointment. Clara's heart sank every time her period came like an unwanted visitor. She cried in the bathroom, staring at negative test strips before throwing them into the bin. Matthew wrestled with guilt. Maybe my low sperm count is the real reason. Maybe I am failing her. But whenever one broke, the other became strong. If Clara wept, Matthew whispered, "We are in this together." If Matthew fell silent, Clara reached for his hand and reminded him, "Don't blame yourself. It's us, not you alone." They learned to take turns carrying the weight, never letting both collapse at the same time. The pressure from outside. The outside world was less forgiving. Relatives made sly comments. "Have you tried seeing a prophet? Maybe you people are too busy with enjoyment." Some even whispered that Matthew should consider a second wife. But Matthew stood firm. "Never. Clara is my wife. If God blesses us with children, it will be with her." If not, I will still remain with her. His loyalty silenced many tongues, but the whispers never stopped. Clara, though deeply moved by his faithfulness, sometimes asked herself in private, am I enough for him, even if no child comes? Faith as a lifeline. They leaned on faith more than ever. Church became their sanctuary. Clara often knelt in prayer, whispering, God, please remember me. Matthew prayed quietly for strength. Some nights, they prayed together, holding hands in their bedroom. On nights when words failed, they sat in silence, tears flowing, their hearts crying louder than their voices ever could. A marriage strengthened. Despite disappointments, their love deepened. They laughed more intentionally, traveled together, and clung to each other. Where other couples broke under the weight of infertility, Matthew and Clara became stronger. One night, after yet another negative test, Matthew kissed her forehead and said softly, even if it takes 10 years, even if it takes 20, you are still my joy. With or without children, I will never stop loving you. For Clara, those words were more healing than any medicine. The miracle. For years into their marriage, Clara noticed changes. Dizziness, nausea, missed periods. She dared not hope. Too many disappointments had scarred her. Quietly, without telling Matthew, she went for a test. When the doctor smiled and said, congratulations, you're pregnant, her knees buckled. She wept uncontrollably, not from fear, but from relief and gratitude. That evening, she waited in the living room for Matthew. When he arrived, she handed him the result with trembling hands. Matthew, she whispered, it happened.
I'm pregnant.
He froze, then shouted with joy, dropping his briefcase. He lifted her high, tears streaming down his face. Clara, God has done it for us. That night, they prayed together, their voices breaking in thanksgiving. Pregnancy, a new season. From then on, Matthew became overprotective. Drop that, my wife, he would say if she tried to carry anything. You are carrying our miracle. Clara laughed. Pregnancy is not sickness. Maybe not, Matthew grinned. But to me, you are fragile glass. He came home early, massaged her feet, cooked her meals, though badly, and pampered her endlessly. Their families erupted with joy at the news. Even those who once mocked them came forward with congratulations. The shadow of shame had been replaced with admiration. The long wait, the first trimester, was rough. Clara battled nausea, weakness, and fear. Matthew, what if something goes wrong? She asked one night. He held her close. Nothing will go wrong. God didn't bring us this far to leave us. The second trimester brought joy. The sound of the baby's heartbeat on the scan. The flutter of tiny kicks. Matthew placed his hands on her stomach nightly, whispering, my princess, your father is waiting for you. Clara laughed. You're sure it's a girl? Yes, Matthew said with certainty. And she will look like you, strong and beautiful. They painted the nursery pink and white, bought tiny clothes, and prepared for the miracle. The day of delivery. It was a rainy night when the contractions began. Clara clutched Matthew's arm. It's time. He rushed her to the hospital, his heart pounding, whispering prayers all the way. Hours passed as he paced outside the labor room, every cry from inside cutting into him. Finally, at dawn, a nurse emerged smiling. Congratulations, sir. It's a girl. Matthew's knees nearly gave way. He rushed in to find Clara exhausted but smiling, cradling a tiny baby wrapped in pink cloth. She's here, Clara whispered. Our princess, Matthew said, his voice breaking. Our miracle. A household transformed. They named her Kayamika. God is beautiful. From that day, their home overflowed with joy. Relatives danced, neighbors congratulated, and their compound echoed with new life. Matthew, once the stern tycoon, now sneaked into the nursery before dawn to kiss his daughter. His business empire no longer defined him. His greatest pride was holding his princess close. Clara embraced motherhood with grace. Sleepless nights didn't matter. Every cry was music. She refused to leave everything to maids. "I'm spoiling myself with love," she would say when Matthew tried to help. Their journey, marked by tears, prayers, and resilience, had finally borne fruit. And as Matthew rocked his daughter one night, he whispered, "You are worth every tear, every weight, every prayer." Balancing empire and family. Matthew's businesses were no longer just growing. They were exploding. From construction contracts in Abuja to oil ventures in Port Harcourt, his empire stretched across Nigeria like veins of gold. His name opened doors in boardrooms, his presence commanded respect, and his signature sealed billion-naira deals. But with expansion came distance. More flights, more meetings, more late nights. Yet, even with all the demands of empire, Matthew refused to let fatherhood become secondary. On every trip, no matter the city or time zone, he called Clara. His first question was never about contracts or profits, but about their daughter. "Clara, put the phone close. Let me hear her voice. Let me hear my princess." Clara would laugh softly, placing the phone against baby Kayamika's lips. Sometimes it was only coos, other times a bubbly giggle, or the tiny babble of a child discovering her voice. Each sound was like oxygen to Matthew. In the middle of tense board meetings, while men in suits argued over oil blocks and foreign investors, Matthew would glance at his phone wallpaper, Kayamika's toothless smile. And in that moment, he remembered what truly mattered. Wealth was good, yes. Power was sweet. But legacy was everything. When he was home, he shed his business armor and became simply Papa. He carried Kayamika on his shoulders as she squealed in delight. He spoon-fed her mashed yam and okra with clumsy patience. He stretched out on the marble floor, allowing her to crawl over him, tug his beard, and claim his heart piece by piece. The center of their world. By her first birthday, Kayamika was no longer just their daughter. She was the jewel of both families. The same relatives who once whispered, "Will Clara ever bear a child?" now crowded their mansion with laughter and gifts. Grandmothers showered her with blessings, aunts draped her with lace dresses, uncles brought toys from abroad, and even strangers admired how Matthew and Clara glowed whenever their daughter was near. The mansion that once echoed with silence and unspoken worries now rang with joy. Baby giggles bounced off marble walls, lullabies floated down hallways, and prayers of gratitude became daily melodies. Sometimes, in the evenings, Matthew would sit on the veranda, Clara by his side, watching Kayamika chase after her little ball. He would shake his head with emotion. "Do you see, Clara? All those years of waiting, of tears, of ridicule. It was for this moment. She was worth it all." Clara, leaning against him, would whisper back, "Yes, God's time is always perfect." A home of wealth but not excess. By the time Kayamika turned 5, Matthew's wealth had made him a household name. His signature black SUVs became a symbol of power on Lagos roads, and Clara was known as Madame Okafor, admired not just for her position but for her calm grace. Their mansion in Ikoyi glittered with chandeliers, marble floors, fleets of cars, and walls lined with art. But Matthew and Clara had made a vow early on. "We will not let wealth spoil her. She must grow up with values." So while Kayamika had toys from London, she also learned how to sweep her room. While she dined at a mahogany table with silver cutlery, she also sat on mats with cousins during family gatherings, eating jollof rice with her hands. Clara often reminded her, "We grew up in a compound where everyone watched over us. That is why we turned out strong. Don't think this house makes you better than anyone. Respect is the true wealth." Matthew, too, shared stories of his past. Whenever Kayamika whined for unnecessary things, he would sit her down. "My daughter, this empire you see was not handed to me. I once sold second-hand clothes in Enugu to pay my fees. Never look down on small beginnings." Time with the gatemen. Despite their wealth, Matthew and Clara believed strongly in community. Their gateman, Musa, an elderly man from the north, had been with Matthew since the early days. Neighbors sometimes mocked quietly, "How can a billionaire let his only child sit with a gateman?" But Matthew and Clara ignored them. They valued the man's loyalty. For Kayamika, those afternoons with Musa were golden. She would perch on a stool by the gate as he sipped tea from his flask. He told her stories of camels in dusty markets, moonlit nights in Kano, and lessons of patience and respect. Money can build a mansion, Musa often told her, but respect builds peace. Matthew, coming home to find them laughing together, would smile. Good. Let her grow up knowing that respect has no class. The maid's neglect. When Kayamika turned 8, Matthew and Clara had to leave for a 2-day trip to Port Harcourt. They left her in the care of their maid and Musa, as they had done before. Before leaving, Clara knelt and smoothed her daughter's hair. Remember all we taught you, my baby. Be polite, listen to the maid, and if you need anything, Musa is at the gate. But once they left, the maid grew restless. She had a boyfriend nearby and saw the trip as her chance for freedom. Kayamika, I'm just stepping out small. Don't open the door for anyone, she said. Her small outings stretched into hours. Lonely in the big mansion, Kayamika wandered to the gate, to Musa. Lessons at the gate. For 2 days she sat with him. He gave her groundnuts, taught her Hausa phrases, and filled the silence with stories. Musa, what if my parents don't come back soon? She asked once. They will, my daughter. But even if they delay, remember, you are strong. And God is always with children who respect him. By the time Matthew and Clara returned, they found Kayamika giggling at the gate as Musa mimicked a frog. They were relieved and grateful. The maid was dismissed, and Musa was praised. Matthew told him, You are not just a gateman, you are family. The sudden illness. Weeks later, Kayamika fell ill. It began with fever and nausea. Clara tried herbs. Matthew insisted on hospital tests. Malaria, negative. Typhoid, negative. Blood work, normal. Clara grew uneasy. Then what is wrong with my daughter? A young lab scientist, noticing her symptoms, decided to check one more thing. He ran a pregnancy test, not routine for a child so young. His hands trembled when the strip revealed 2 red lines. He repeated the test. Same result. Positive. The revelation. The doctor called Matthew and Clara back in. His voice shook. Mr. and Mrs. Okafor, your daughter is not suffering from malaria or typhoid. According to the tests, she is pregnant. The words dropped like thunder. Clara screamed, clutching her chest. Matthew froze, then his face contorted with rage. Pregnant? She is 8 years old. What are you saying? Kayamika sat silent, tears slipping down her cheeks. The shattering confession. Back home, the house felt suffocating. Chandeliers glowed, but darkness weighed heavy. They sat Kayamika down. Clara knelt, her voice breaking. My baby, we love you. Please, tell us the truth. Who did this to you? Matthew's voice was firm but trembling. Kayamika, don't protect anyone. Just speak. At first she shook her head, sobbing. Then, with a trembling whisper, it was Musa. The room froze. She broke down, words spilling out. He has been doing it when you travel, when you go out. He calls me to the gatehouse. He said it's our secret. He said he'll hurt me if I tell. Clara wailed, collapsing on the floor. Matthew staggered back, his chest heaving. Musa? The man I trusted with my life? The man I called family? The empire builder, the billionaire who commanded nations, sank into a chair, weeping into his hands. The storm ahead. The revelation was only the beginning. For Matthew and Clara, the nightmare was far from over. Their hearts were torn between rage, grief, and confusion. They were now faced with decisions that no parent should ever have to make. Should they confront Musa directly? Should they call the police immediately? Or handle it quietly to protect their daughter's dignity? How would they protect Kayamika from the shame, the whispers, the questions society was already sharpening on its tongue? And most of all, how would they live with the reality that the man they trusted most, a man who had been like family, had violated their home from within? That night, no one in the Okafor mansion found rest. The house, once full of warmth and laughter, felt like a prison of sorrow. Kayamika's cries pierced through the walls, each sob breaking Clara's spirit further. Clara clutched her daughter tightly to her chest, rocking her like a baby, whispering, "It's okay, my jewel. It's okay, my sunshine." But the tremors in her voice betrayed the fact that nothing was okay. Matthew paced the length of their grand bedroom like a lion trapped in a cage. His fists clenched, his jaw tight, his eyes wild. He could not sleep. He could not sit. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Musa's face, and his blood boiled with a fury so strong, he feared he might commit murder. The storm had begun, and it was only the first night. The arrest. At dawn, before the sun had fully risen, the silence of the street was broken by the low hum of an approaching vehicle. A black police van rolled up to the mansion's gates. Two uniformed officers, armed and alert, stepped out and rapped firmly against the iron bars. Inside the security house, Musa stirred from his wooden stool. Still groggy from sleep, he rubbed his eyes and shuffled lazily to the gate. "Una Don come this early? What'n happen?" he asked casually, thinking it was an early delivery truck or maybe a neighborhood patrol. But the moment he unlocked and pushed the gate open, the officers grabbed him by the arms with military precision. "You are under arrest," one barked. Musa blinked in confusion, his lips trembling. For what? What'd I do?" "Oga police a beg." Before he could finish, heavy footsteps thundered down the driveway. Matthew emerged, his dressing gown barely tied, his face dark as thunderclouds. "You dare ask me what you've done?" he thundered. His voice was so sharp, the officers themselves stiffened. "You monster! You animal! You touched my daughter!" Musa's eyes darted in panic. "Sir Matthew, no. I swear. I don't understand." But his plea was cut short by a thunderous slap that exploded across his cheek. Matthew's palm crashed against him with such force that Musa staggered, blood springing to the corner of his mouth. "That is for my daughter," Matthew roared, his whole body trembling with rage. "For betraying my trust. For destroying her innocence. You will rot in prison until worms feed on your bones." Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, gathered outside the gates. Whispers flew like wildfire. "Is that not Musa, their gateman? What has he done? See as Oga Matthew Day vex. Something big don happen oh." The officers shoved Musa into the van as he shouted, "I didn't do anything. God knows. I didn't do anything." But his words fell flat. To the crowd, his guilt was already written all over him. The van drove off, leaving behind silence, the kind of silence that was louder than noise. A painful appointment. Later that same day, Matthew and Clara sat in the hospital waiting room, their faces pale, their hearts bleeding. Kayamika sat between them, her head resting weakly against Clara's lap. Clara's eyes were swollen from hours of weeping. She stroked her daughter's hair, whispering, "My baby, my jewel. You are too young to carry this burden, too young to carry this pain. We will not let your life be destroyed by what he did." The doctor, a middle-aged woman with kind but weary eyes, sat across from them. She had seen cases like this before, but the sight of a child as young as Kayamika always shook her deeply. "She is very young," the doctor said softly. "Termination at this stage will protect her health and her future. It is a painful decision, but medically, it is the best." Clara's hands trembled as she reached for the consent form. Her tears blurred the words on the page. "God, is this what motherhood has become for me? To watch my daughter suffer like this at 8. Beside her, Matthew's face hardened with guilt. He pressed his hand over hers. His voice cracked. "This is my fault. I should have been more careful. I should have seen the signs. I left her in his hands. I failed her, Clara." Clara turned to him sharply, shaking her head through tears. "No, this is not your fault. It is not mine. It is not hers. It is his, that devil in human skin. He destroyed her innocence, but he will not destroy her future. We won't let him." A family scarred but unbroken. The procedure was carried out the same day. It was quiet, harrowing, and filled with sobs that echoed down the sterile hospital corridors. Clara stayed by Kayamika's side the entire time, holding her hand, whispering prayers under her breath. When it was over, Kayamika looked weak, but safe. Clara kissed her forehead repeatedly. "You did nothing wrong, my jewel. You are still pure. You are still my sunshine. Don't ever forget that." That night, back at the mansion, Matthew held his daughter close, rocking her gently like she was still a baby. Tears streamed down his face as he whispered, "No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it with my life." Clara, watching them from the doorway, folded her arms around herself and prayed silently. "Lord, heal my daughter. Heal my home. Turn this pain into testimony." A family transformed. Matthew's new mission. Though Matthew still oversaw his chain of businesses, something in him had shifted forever. The empire he had once guarded with all his strength now felt small compared to the fire that burned in his heart for justice. He began donating heavily to organizations across Nigeria that fought child abuse, sponsoring awareness programs in schools and funding shelters for abandoned children. Newspapers soon picked it up. Billionaire businessman turns philanthropist. The Kayamika Trust. The day he officially launched the foundation, named after his daughter. The hall was filled with dignitaries, journalists, pastors, and survivors. Cameras flashed as Matthew walked up to the podium, his wife and daughter standing beside him. He adjusted the microphone, his usually stern voice breaking with emotion. "Money built my empire," he said, pausing as his eyes found Kayamika's. "But this mission, this fight to protect children and give survivors hope, this is what will build my legacy." The hall erupted in applause. Clara, standing tall in a flowing Ankara gown, held Kayamika's hand. Her eyes glistened with pride and gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt that their pain had found purpose. Clara's strength. If Matthew's mission was the foundation, Clara's strength was its heartbeat. What had once been silent tears became a fearless voice. She began visiting women's groups, churches, and schools, standing before mothers and fathers, telling her story, carefully, without shame, but with a conviction that pierced hearts. "Evil does not always wear the face of a stranger," she would say, her voice firm. "Sometimes it is the one we call family. Protect your children. Listen to them. Don't ever assume they are safe just because someone looks humble or loyal." Her words carried weight because they came from scars. Women wept openly during her talks. Some lined up afterward, whispering confessions of abuse in their homes, marriages, or families. Clara embraced them one by one, her voice soft but steady. "You are not alone. Speak out. Protect your children. Break the silence." Soon, pastors began inviting her to conferences. Schools requested her as a guest speaker. Slowly, she became a beacon, a symbol of what it meant to turn personal pain into collective strength. Kayamika's growth, reclaiming her joy. By the time she turned 12, Kayamika was no longer the broken little girl of 4 years earlier. Her spirit, though scarred, had become steel wrapped in velvet. Strong, resilient, yet tender. She excelled in school, her sharp mind setting her apart. She buried herself in books and developed an early love for writing. Clara encouraged her to keep a diary, telling her, "Write, my jewel. Let the paper carry the weight your heart cannot." Those diaries became her secret world. In one entry she wrote, "They hurt me, but they didn't win. I still have Mama and Papa. I still have love. That is enough for me to fight." She began winning essay competitions. Teachers praised her maturity and brilliance. Classmates admired her quiet dignity, a father's pride. Sometimes Matthew would pause in the middle of a busy day just to watch her study or hear her laugh. His chest swelled with pride and guilt. One night, as he and Clara sat together, he whispered, "I thought her life was finished the day we heard that test result. But look at her now. Our miracle is still a miracle." Clara leaned against him, tears in her eyes. "God is rewriting her story," she said softly. From pain to purpose. Though their journey had been one of tears and heartbreak, The Okafors refused to let tragedy end in despair. They transformed their pain into advocacy, their silence into a platform, their grief into healing for others. Clara summarized it best one evening as she stood by Kayamika's bed, watching her sleep. The girl's chest rose and fell softly, her face peaceful. Clara whispered, "The devil tried to destroy us through shame, but God used this fire to make us stronger. This is no longer just our story. It is a testimony for others." And slowly, in the mansion that had once echoed with screams and sorrow, laughter returned. First small, then louder. Kayamika's giggles in the kitchen, Clara's humming as she cooked, Matthew's booming laugh during family dinners. The sound of a family scarred, but unbroken. Kayamika at 16. By the time Kayamika turned 16, she had blossomed into a striking young woman. She was tall, graceful, with bright eyes that seemed to carry secrets only God knew. Her gentle smile lit up rooms. Teachers praised her intelligence. Classmates admired her discipline. Neighbors whispered, "That girl will go far." But behind her beauty and brilliance was a soul tempered by fire. She had walked through trauma at an age too young to understand it, and though she laughed easily now, part of her heart always carried the quiet weight of memory. Her parents' fierce protectiveness. Matthew and Clara, still haunted by her childhood ordeal, became fiercely protective as she entered her teenage years. She was rarely allowed to attend sleepovers. Every outing required a detailed explanation: who, where, when, and with whom. A driver always waited by the school gate, even during rehearsals. Friends sometimes teased her, "Kayamika, you're not a baby anymore. Why do your parents guard you like gold?" She would smile faintly and reply, "Because I am gold to them. You don't know what they've lost, and what they've fought to keep." Though sometimes frustrated, she understood. Their strictness was not control, it was love scarred by history. Learning who to trust. Her past had taught her caution. While other girls giggled with boys, Kayamika kept her distance. Male classmates tried to befriend her, but her heart was slow to open. Whenever anyone got too close, she remembered Musa, the man she once trusted like family, who betrayed her. It wasn't hatred, it was self-preservation. To Kayamika, trust was sacred, something earned slowly, never given freely. Even with female friends, she was careful. She studied people keenly. She noticed how they treated waiters, drivers, or maids. Her private test was simple: if you cannot respect them, then you cannot be my friend. Resilience in the shadows. Despite the shadows of her past, Kayamika's resilience shone brightly. Therapy, her parents' unwavering love, and her own determination had given her tools to rise above. She threw herself into academics, topping her class. She joined the debate team, where her voice carried authority far beyond her years. Teachers often said, "This girl speaks with the wisdom of someone much older." But when the house was quiet, and she wrote in her diary, her words revealed the truth hidden behind her smile. "I am strong, but I am still healing. I laugh, but I still remember. Sometimes I wonder if I will ever fully trust anyone with my heart." Matthew and Clara's pride. Though the weight of guilt never fully left them, Matthew and Clara often found themselves overwhelmed with pride whenever they looked at their daughter. To them, Kayamika was no longer just the fragile miracle they once feared losing. She was living proof that beauty, strength, and resilience could rise even from the ashes of tragedy. Matthew would sometimes sit with her late at night, watching her study or write in her diary. His deep voice would soften as he said, "My daughter, life tried to break you before you even began, but look at you now, unshaken, unbowed, stronger than even me." Kayamika would smile faintly, her pen still moving across the page. "Papa, I'm only strong because you and Mama never let me fall." At such moments, Clara would step in, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She would place her hands on her daughter's shoulders and whisper, "But don't let the shadows steal your light, my jewel. Keep shining. One day you will trust again. Not because the world is perfect, but because your heart deserves peace." Those words became like anchors in Kayamika's soul. reminders that her parents' love was her shield, and their pride her crown. A future unwritten. Kayamika's teenage years unfolded like a careful dance, outwardly dazzling yet quietly guarded. In public, she shone with brilliance, excelling in her academics, earning admiration for her debates, and carrying herself with a grace that made people take notice. Teachers praised her discipline. Classmates envied her confidence. Neighbors whispered with awe, "That girl is destined for greatness." But privately, her heart was cautious. She knew her story was not ordinary, carried weight heavier, darker, yet also brighter in its victory. She had fought a battle most people never even imagined, and though she carried scars, she also carried dignity. Sometimes, when alone with her diary, she asked herself questions she could not voice aloud. Will I ever find someone I can trust fully, the way Papa trusts Mama? Will anyone ever see me as I truly am, not as what I went through? She didn't know the answers yet, but she knew one truth: her past would not be her prison. So she walked forward, head high, her steps steady. A survivor, a daughter cherished, a young woman on the brink of adulthood, carrying both the shadows of her past and the fire of resilience that refused to be extinguished. The future was still unwritten, but she was determined to write it herself, with courage, with grace, and with a strength no tragedy could erase. Thanks for watching. Kindly like, share with friends, and subscribe for more amazing stories.